So, Emil Ace Smacker, by this point the dude's definitely made a name for himself. With 3 current entries, 1 remake, and an upcoming 4th entry to boot, it's no wonder the Five Nights at Candy series is still fairly talked about. I've covered Candies 1, 2, and 1 remastered, the latter 2 more recently, with my cover of the first game. Well, it's a Go Motion video posted before the year 2020, what do you expect, quality? But I haven't looked at all 3 of those games. All I have left to look at for the time being is the 3rd and latest entry in the series, Five Nights at Candies 3. After a somewhat insignificant mild, roughly several month delay, the game was finally released on March 3rd, 2017, the same day as the Switch launch actually, which Emil did acknowledge. Now this is a fan game that I've heard a lot of mixed opinions on. Some people seem to love it and all the new ideas it introduces, but I've also seen a fair number of criticisms tossed around, and at that, being a fan game that strives to be as ambitious as I've heard, you know, I'm interested to dive into this thing and see exactly what seems to be so controversial. But would I be lying to you if I told you I wasn't seeing a pattern here? Well, yeah, probably. It feels like, as respected as these fan games are, and by all means, Candies 1 and 2 are at the very least good fan games, I don't know, it feels like the previous 2 entries didn't do much more than prove themselves to just be fairly solid and fairly well-rounded fan interpretations of the ideas laid out by the Freddy's games. They borrowed and remixed familiar mechanics, gave us some cool looking characters and locations, but that's really the height of what they were. I mean, with the series rooted in almost having been a total carbon copy of Five Nights at Freddy's, it's no surprise. So with that being said, I want to see what Candies 3 does do differently. The teasers and trailer footage make this out to be a very unique looking fan game, and by the looks of things, the environments and themes are a little more out there in comparison to a lot of these fan games, so here's to hoping that the gameplay follows suit. So the game opens up to a cutscene. We're being talked at by some wooden ventriloquist doll-looking ass who remembers what we did, and it happens because of you. Yeah, it's a bit cheesy and it feels like pretty typical generic villain exposition. It's silly, but if you want to set up foreshadowing for some intimidating bad guy in a FNAF fan game, there's worse ways to do it. Anyway, after that, well, that menu screen. The way this creepy looking organic monster on the right is twitching his head, the way the 3's hovering over the title, creating that negative space, and the smaller stuff even, like the crimson red static in the background, already give us a good idea of the sort of color motifs and theming that the game will throw at us. I like it when a title screen does match the game you're in for. For a FNAF fan game especially, that's really cool. I know it's like hardly a point of praise, but you'd be surprised at how many fan games miss this. So yeah, once you go ahead and start the night, you're met with another cutscene. Thank God, I knew these games were missing something. It's an exchange between who I assume to be a counselor and us, Mary Schmidt, the very same Mary Schmidt we play as in Candies 1, I believe. However, we're pretty young in this game, no older than 9 or 10 I'm guessing, so yeah, this game takes place right at the beginning of the story in 1962. The events of the short minigame style teaser in Candies 2 for this very game are recalled. You watching your brother walk up to the rat animatronic and getting senselessly pummeled, and 2 weeks later, Mary's in trauma recovery from seeing this happen. Well, that and the fact that there was a separate incident that happened a year ago that Mary's been having nightmares about at the Rat and Cat Theatre, and Mary visualizes her fears on paper, taking the form of Monster Rat and Monster Cat respectively. The cutscene ends with Mary being asked to recall what happened at the theatre, which lays down the basis for the gameplay. Now, unlike most fan games, well, I'd say most here, let's be real, probably unlike any other fan game, starting a night here doesn't automatically chuck you into the meat of the gameplay. Here we actually start off in a little retro looking bedroom. It's pretty bare bones, save for a bed, this blue cat dude, and Mary. So, walking up to this guy, he introduces himself as the Origami Cat, and exists almost to replace the typical phone guy. He'll talk you through everything that's going down, from how the main gameplay works to where you are right now, that being the dreamscape. At the minute, yeah, there's hardly anything here. You're dreaming about your old bedroom, but you can't seem to remember much about it, and that's really the overarching theme that ties the game together here, remembering the past to help truly recover from the aforementioned incident. In the case of the dreamscape, this means that each night you'll start to remember more and more of your old bedroom, pretty much acting as an indicator that Mary is making progress. To the north of the dreamscape is an entirely separate area, the deepscape. This is what I'm taking to be the representation of where Mary's deepest memories reside, represented by a massive black void filled with forking pathways, philosophical boulders, shitter. It's a bit of a dangerous romp for sure, and entering the deepscape at all each night is entirely optional. Well, save for the first night, but it's a neat little way to find collectibles, namely these arcade game cartridges and newspaper clippings, and talk to hidden NPCs, memories taking the form of old toys Mary used to play with. If you have anything to say it now. Yeah, each time I find one of these guys, I end each message with that. Kinda weird, but okay. But yeah, the basic rules of this thing involve sticking to the path for 2 reasons. 1, you'll only be able to teleport back to the exit when you're on the path, and 2, this. As the nights progress, finding secrets in the deepscape becomes far more challenging, with fun wacky elements such as a time limit on how long you can stray off the main path, and these funky looking dream trees guiding the way. And you know, I think this is cool. Even for a little night starter section, you're still introducing new concepts and ideas to keep things fresh. fresh. Like I mentioned, usually finding this stuff is optional. In the Dreamscape you can go straight to bed, start the night, but not for night 1. I guess for the sake of introducing you to the concept, you're tasked with finding the tape player hidden in the Deepscape before you start night 1, the tape player being a pretty important mechanic in the core gameplay, which I'll get into momentarily. So anyway, yeah, grab the tape player, return to the Dreamscape, hey presto, night 1. Did I mention this was a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game? The sheer amount of extra content this game throws at you, yeah, trust me on this one, is a lot. I mean, we're just getting started and I can already feel the piss stain forming. I'm what they call scared shitless. Okay, for real, the actual main night segments. So we're sat in one big ass bedroom, equipped only with a flashlight and a tape player. As for the game mechanics here, well, gone is the RNG of watching and waiting for monsters to waltz on over to you, only to be stopped by whatever crazy gimmick pulls them away. No, here you're just up against the one monster as he slips in and out of the room, appearing in one of 3 locations at one time. You'll be able to use your flashlight to scare him off for the time being, but sooner or later, he'll enter the room and you're thrown into his attack sequence. And dude, what the hell? A fan game supposed to be this cool? The way the sound key strikes, that thumping visual overlay, the way the room brightens to really show you what's up, and this dude just goes at it, attempting to make haste. But if you're lucky and you make it, he'll crawl under the bed. When he does, real quick, you gotta check which side of the bed he's on by looking under it, shine your flashlight at the wall on the opposite end of the room to lure him out, and finally, on a faint audio cue, you can throw the light in his face and you can scare him off for good. Okay, say what you will about it being different from the sort of mechanics you often get in these fan games, that's a really freaking cool fight sequence, and that's what I really love about this too. You're not helplessly defending yourself with a flash beacon or keeping the animatronics out by shutting doors. This guy's persistent, it genuinely feels like you're fighting against him. There's resistance there. Not only is that a lot more fun in the moment-to-moment gameplay, the fact that you have a fighting chance makes the gameplay feel a lot scarier. There's more tension when you've really got to put your all into getting rid of the dude. So yeah, anyway, there's that malarkey. The only other real mechanic here is the tape player from earlier. Now, in concept, it's a pretty cool mechanic. The player contains a cassette tape labeled Merry Sleep Music, and it speeds up the night twice as fast. Well, the time you're spending on the night, I mean, you're not going to be battling this dude twice as quick or anything. And that's really cool. In theory, I haven't seen many fan games do something like this, actually speeding up or slowing down the time you'll spend in a single night in a typical 12 to 6 AM fan game. That's a pretty interesting take. The tape does of course end, so you'll have to turn back around to rewind it, and play it again once it's wound. There's also a fair chance that the monster rat will jam the tape if it's playing when he crawls under the bed. Does this do anything to actually harm you? Well, no, but it does very easily mask his sound cue for leaving, and if you miss that, well, it's virtually game over. But here's where my problem lies with this. Using night 1 as a good example where I'm able to use the tape player to its fullest extent without distraction, that night took me 7 minutes and 49 seconds to beat. Compare that to a night where I didn't use the tape player at all. That was 13 minutes and 2 seconds. Now I'm willing to forgive the fact that not all of night 1 was spent playing the tape, which is why the numbers aren't exact, but even then, the night where I was playing the tape the most was nearly 8 minutes long, which is longer than any given night in either Candy's 1 or 2. My point is, these nights can eat up a lot of your time. And is it really speeding up when the average night length with the tape player playing as much as possible in this game is longer than a regular night in both previous entries in the series? I don't know, punishment by extending the length of the night as opposed to facing further danger feels a bit artificial to me, and kinda lame if I'm being honest. Instead of giving you something to worry about for failing to play the tape, it's just more of what you're already doing for longer. And I know playing the tape is optional, it's not meant to act as a mechanic to harm you, but I really think that was a missed opportunity here. If you're gonna give me a mechanic that supposedly makes things easier for me, don't do it by taking away what the previous games had and handing me that back as the reward for doing so. Or at least give me a better trade-off for playing the tape, in return for a punishment that actually makes things trickier if I don't. And this feeds further into why, despite all the praise I've given the whole monster rat encounter sequence, I feel like these night segments can be some of the most tedious and uninteresting parts of the whole game. I feel like by the end of it, I was even getting sick of just hearing that tape music. I understand why the game was designed this way, the whole waiting and waiting of monster rats until he suddenly appears and you gotta attack him, rinse and repeat deal. It is for scares, building up that tension and finally that release when you face him for real. But this system that prioritizes the exact same encounter over and over and over again, with little to no variety each time, makes the game far too predictable to be very interesting to me. I also don't think it helps that the gaps between fight sequences are far longer than they need to be. Like, if I'm already a couple nights in, the scares have already worn off, I just want to beat this guy to a pulp. But I can't do that when 50% of the gameplay is just sliding my mouse back and forth across the room. Say what you will about FNAF fan games being the same thing each night or whatever, but honestly, I think the appeal of fan games that play off the typical formula that also offer interesting mechanics is that you're playing with chance to some degree. Hell, even Candy's one, which I bashed for feeling too much like a clone of Freddy's one, offered more variety in the way the nights play out because, the main nights at least, were balanced well enough that the game could throw any combination of characters at you and you'd still be able to find a way to push through. Even during downtime, you'd be able to flick through cameras. Here, there's really no chance and no surprises. You know that the rat is coming for you eventually, and you deal with him the exact same way each time, with no other enemies to play off of, and the downtime couldn't be more boring. Where Five Nights at Candy's 1 showed that RNG can be too intensive, Five Nights at Candy's 3 is a better example of where RNG isn't used enough. I also found the whole spooky dark room vibe wears off quickly. One Night at Flumpty's 2, a joke game, did this better in my opinion. The ominous buzzing sound is all you hear as the monsters stare you down, similar to Candy's 3, but in that game it works better because it's balanced with moments where you're not as in much danger. I'm not asking for Candy's 3 to go full parody mode, but the contrast between what's meant to scare the player and what isn't really can make those moments stronger. The only real extra mechanic here is the monster cat. He'll randomly appear at either end of your bed from night 3 onwards and gradually get closer and closer. But the problem is that he's so slow, he's nothing more than a distraction. It's super disappointing, you hardly get to see the guy. It really also doesn't help that the very room you're meant to feel immersed in is littered with YouTuber references and iconography. I'm all for throwing a few Easter eggs into a game. Candy's 1 and 2 actually both did this spectacularly. Both the Dorko and Markiplier nods are real subtle and something you definitely have to go out of your way to find. Candy's 2 was in a similar boat with a couple of notable character references hidden behind blueprints that are scattered around the complex, but dude, this straight up just isn't something I'd ever ask out of a fan game, especially as someone who's pretty familiar with most if not all of the people referenced. It's just distracting, especially from the 60s aesthetic that I assume Emil was going for here. The biggest offender has to be the Jacksepticeye lullaby here. It's bright green and screams anything but immersion. Thankfully I got used to it all. After all, you could pass off most of these references as just strange looking toys if you didn't know any better. Oh, and just a side note, most Clickteam games seem to darken my monitor when they're full screen for some reason. So for the entirety of my Five Nights at Candy's 3 playthrough, instead of the game looking like this, it was looking like this. So not only is the game itself pretty dark anyway, I could barely see anything outside of the circumference where the light begins to fall off. Okay, listen, I don't hate this game. Like I mentioned, the new mechanics that this game introduces are cool, they really are. But I think the way they're executed just isn't very involving at all, at least to start off with. The monster rat gives you a fairly interesting fight, but they're so few and far between that you'll end up doing practically nothing for the good majority of each night. The monster cat's a somewhat interesting concept, but he's so slow that it's nearly pointless. The tape player messing with the time is a really cool idea, but the reward you're getting for keeping it going is just what you get by default in the other games, and the punishment is too underwhelming. Five Nights at Candy's 3 is a game that suffers from poor execution here, and that really sucks. I feel like there's so much potential here that could have been in reality. I don't know if it was just down to Emil wanting to get the game finished or whatever, and like I say, what is here is neat. But with a little more time, I feel like this portion of the game could have been more fleshed out and interesting, at least for the sake of replayability, which is something you'll definitely be worrying about if you want all the endings here. It's a very ambitious fan game that has a lot going for it, but trying to do so much at once might have contributed to the watered down quality of the gameplay here. You know, maybe it is on me for a bit for putting too much focus into the main night segments here, as they sure aren't the highlight of the game. And that's not coming from a subjective point of view. I mean, they literally aren't the biggest focus of the game as a whole. There's actually a ton more to unpack from this point on. So once you get through a night, you're thrown into a minigame, not the Dreamscape. This is one portion of the game where you're awake and moving. Yeah, we're at the Rat and Cat Theatre. You'll walk around the restaurant talking to NPCs, and that's about it. I mean, really, the whole point of these things is to talk to the costume dude at the back of the diner. He'll offer to play hide and seek with you, you'll go hide in the closet, and he'll get you every time. It's the exact same thing nights 1 to 4. There are other NPCs you can talk to, including your dad, and sometimes they'll drop a bit of foreshadowing here and there, but it's not much that they really have to offer in terms of, like, interesting plot stuff. Wait, what's this? 1, they're called retrospectives, and it's art. 2, shut up. These minigames aren't totally lacking substance, though. You do get to talk to this puppeteer dude, who talks about, Vinny, his ventriloquist puppet, I assume, and, okay, yeah, I'm guessing the puppet is this dude we saw in the intro, very cute. So it's Night 5's minigame where shit really goes down, and by that, I mean you wander into the staff area, you watch the drunk guy in the rat costume get rattled by the puppeteer, who then kills him on accident, like he do, and then willfully strangles the guy who went to, you know, go call the authorities. You know, there's a word I'm looking for here. Ah, there it is. I mean, what? Talk about going from 0 to 100, dude. Holy crap. I mean, it's pretty unexpected. Like, the guy shows remorse for the accident first time round, but then he immediately goes full psycho and straight up chokes the other guy to death. Unless there's some foreshadowing here I missed, I don't know, it seems kinda forced. But that sure is a ton of events, I'll tell you that much. This sure does end strangely though. We're not really given much of a satisfying close to this, though it's suggested that Mary is on her way to full recovery, and it also implies that Mary would go on to make a statement to the police in order to help put the puppeteer behind bars. And yeah, that's it really. We never get to see what happens after this, and yep, of course. So, the final night, or night 6 you could put it, and yeah, this all makes sense now. The puppet from earlier is in fact Vinny, taking the form of another one of Mary's nightmares because he represents the puppeteer that she saw murder the rat and cat in the staff room, who I assume both went on to form her nightmares about the rat and cat respectively. This is what Vinny was referring to in regards to this being your fault. How if you were never in that closet, this never would have happened. Actually, now that I think about it, and how I've gone this long without mentioning it is beyond me, the reverse puppet in the first Candy's game is a form of Vinny. My mistake, your problem, all of this is what he was referring to. You are in fact playing as the very same Mary Schmidt in that game. So wait, does the puppeteer like die and possess his own creation or something? For real, I'm guessing the cutscenes with him in are only hallucinations, but I don't know. Either way, holy crap, this was either some insane foreshadowing on Emil's part, or he had this whole thing loosely planned out from the very beginning. Anyway, Vinny's kind of a dick. So anyway, yeah, night 6 starts, and okay, things are already different here. For one, the monster cat is gone. For two, well, this. Oh, this is not a great night. Remember when I complained about how boring the previous nights were due to the lack of action? Well, hey, here's my comeuppance. This slippery bastard, Monster Vinny, is nearly impossible to beat. He is Monster Rat on friggin' steroids. I don't know, man. You know, night 6 stressed me out. You're not only simultaneously ramping up the difficulty, you're actively changing the way encounters work too. And yeah, by changing it's still a case of show don't tell. Like, you can infer pretty easily how you'll have to work with Vinny here from your encounters with Monster Rat. So in that sense, I suppose it's more of an elaboration of the mechanics from the previous nights, but even at that, I genuinely think that Night 6 needs to be a tad more forgiving, or at the very least, introduce us to a version of Night 6 prior where the stakes aren't as high, and get us used to those concepts in a more forgiving setting, so that when you really want to throw us into Night 6's difficulty, we've already got a fairly good grasp on how to deal with it. I mean, you're not only dealing with a much more slippery enemy, but instead of the usual triangle formation that the Monster Rat defends himself with, Monster Vinny seems to have total control over where he wants to move his head in a far more unpredictable circular formation. And not only that, at the point where the Monster Rat would usually give in and hide under the bed, Monster Vinny scoots on over to either of the two remaining encounter spots in your room, where you'll have to repeat the process all over again. He'll do this upwards of 2 or 3 times, and if you're lucky enough to have survived all that, then he'll hide under the bed, but you still gotta be pretty damn fast to lure him out and successfully get rid of him. Of course, not even counting the potential of leaving the cassette player on and having Vinny mess with the tape masking his audio cue to leave, that's a big jump in difficulty from the relatively far common Nights 1 to 5. Now there is a point later in the game if you're going for a certain ending where you will have to fight this boss again, so with that in mind, I think that would have been the perfect opportunity to introduce all the ramped up difficulty mechanics for round 2. Round 1, i.e. the regular Night 6 in this scenario, would still have Vinny doing his weird circular formation defense stuff, but he wouldn't yet be able to move around the room. With that being said, I think his difficulty leveling should stay the same here too, given how much easier removing that feature would make the night. Again, just to ease the player in a bit more, so that when you're already going for that particular ending that requires that fight with Monster Vinny again, you're a lot more prepared, and not to mention, makes going for that ending feel like more of a proper challenge. So there's a good thing there's a night skip exploit. I'm so sorry. I don't know what kind of bad luck Emil Mac has been cursed with here, but 2 of the 3 entries in this game series both have game-breaking exploits that allow you to surpass nights too easily. At least in Candies 2 you had to put some effort into getting jump scared and having the game glitch out. Do you want me to show you how to skip the night in Candies 3? Yep, there it is. Yep, move the mouse to the bottom left corner of the screen. That's it. How there isn't some kind of failsafe here is beyond me. But okay, at least you can't skip the entire game with this. The exploit works the way it does because when the Monster Rat enters the room, his sequence won't begin until you shine your flashlight at him, so if you never interact with the game, he'll never attack you. This is why the exploit works for nights 1, 2, and 6, where you're only dealing with either Monster Rat or Monster Vinny, but not for nights 3, 4, and 5, because the Monster Cat enters the equation. Yeah, so really the Monster Cat's mechanic is what the automatic failsafe should have been. Just have it activate on the nights where you're only facing the one monster if you don't find it in time. And yeah, just like last time, I'm playing on the latest available version, 1.0.3. So yeah, that's really it for the majority of the game. Once you beat night 6, instead of the truth ending, you get the end. Mary's finally able to finish therapy and justice is finally served. So hey, that's 5 Nights at Candies 3, thanks for watching, later! Oh, and by the way, we're only about halfway through the game's content. Okay, so the only section left on the mini screen is the extras menu, and we actually get a slew of behind the scenes content here. We got full body monster renders, development sketches, jump scares with adjustable speeds, the making of Monster Rats, even beta content from across the trilogy, including scrapped teasers. Do I even need to act surprised? This is Emil Maka we're talking about. Throwing in all this extra stuff is always really appreciated. And hey, a big old group photo at the end, cool. There's two other options here, which are two extra gameplay modes, challenges and arcade. Wait a second. Oh, yeah, right. Those arcade games we collected in the Deepscape unlocked these three minigames. Fishing with Candy, Cindy's Garden, and Candy's Adventure. I'm guessing by the sheer amount of extra cartridges, the latter's the biggest game of the three. So starting off with Fishing with Candy, it's a pretty simple arcade-styled game. Catch the fish and avoid everything else, collect 3 pieces of garbage, and it's game over. Cindy's Garden is a whack-a-mole sort of deal, knock out the bastards coming to steal your flowers. And finally, Candy's Adventure. This is one long-ass platformer level that takes you through 3 sections, and holy crap, when I say bigger game, I mean where Fishing with Candy and Cindy's Garden took maybe a collective 5 minutes to beat. Candy's Adventure took me almost an hour. It's surprisingly tough. Now, of course, this is a Five Nights at Freddy's fan game. You don't throw in a minigame without it having lore purpose. So once you beat each of these retro-looking 8-bit minigames, the game glitches out and you're taken to a monochrome Atari-looking stage. Like with the previous 2 games, I'm not here to theorize, but from the looks of things, these minigames appear to be retellings of actual events in the game's universe. The minigame you'll get for beating Cindy's Garden is pretty obvious what it is. It's you as the rat killing the pair of twins that would later go on to possess Candy and Cindy. The other 2 are a little more ambiguous. One features the rat killing some guard, and the other, I don't know. I take it you're playing as a kid's mother or something who walks into a room where I'm guessing the FNAF 2 puppet turns into Vinny or something. I'm guessing this is symbolism over anything else. So is that all? Nope. You gotta understand there are several endings to this game, and technically I've only gone over half of them. The real other big one requires an entire replay of the game, which means playing through each night again, which, oh my god, this thing really wasn't built for replayability, huh? So upon beating night 6, you actually get a strange little string of text from, well, we have no idea, specifically at least, but this seems to be coming from another forgotten toy, like the ones in the Deepscape, that Mary never finished a game of hide and seek with. One phrase keeps getting repeated over and over though, the phrase, "Where is he?" Just keep asking, we're told. Maybe ask the others. Okay, so assuming he's another forgotten toy, the others must be the other toys in the Deepscape, right? After all, yeah, that's right. If you have anything to say it now. That must be the prompt to ask where he is. So yeah, going up to each of the forgotten toys, waiting for that prompt, and typing "where is he" into your keyboard. Hey, there we go. Okay, I'll shut the hell up now. Yeah, each one of these dudes gives you a hint as to what you'll have to do to find this mystery character. The race card tells you to collect all 100, then go above the entrance. That means going into Candy's Adventure, grabbing all the coins, and jumping above the cave entrance after beating the first night again, of course. Really? You'd think this would be accounted for, like you've just beaten the game, presumably. You've really got to go back and beat all the nights again. So anyway, yeah, do that, and oh no, we didn't catch him, who would have thought? We do get this Omega Flowey laugh thingy, sure, why not? Then we get this super weird zoom in of the dude's face. I wish I could tell you what the hell is going on here. Apparently it's a glitch, whether intentional or unintentional, who knows. So after all that, we find ourselves in yet another minigame. It's a cute car racing game against the strange little peppermint looking dude. And this is basically the gist of how each of these encounters will play out. Once you beat him at his own game, you're rewarded with a 1/5 of a star on the title screen, meaning there's 4 more of these to go. The formula is the same here. Go find a toy in the Deepscape, follow the hint, find the sneaky badger, and play a minigame based on the character you talk to in the Deepscape. Oh, also, one thing I found super weird was that a counter randomly appears in Night 5's Deepscape. I remember getting to a certain point after running around a bit. It went up to 12 randomly, and I found the teapot guy. But on the playthrough where I was actually looking for these guys, I couldn't seem to find the dude anywhere. Apparently you just gotta walk around this rock and the counter goes up to 12 and he appears. How the hell was I supposed to know that? That's random as hell, dude. But yeah, going back to the secret minigames you'll find for doing whatever task you're given, I gotta give Emil props for the difficulty in these minigames. Really sells you the idea that whoever's pulling you along here is a real troublemaker. Except the dark game though. I got through that in like a minute. So once you complete the final minigame, you get the star's completed, but you don't seem to get anything for it. That's because you gotta click on the star. I don't know why it doesn't just bring you straight to the screen you get for clicking on it. Yeah, anyway, we made it. However, this mysterious mofo still wants us to remember one last thing about him. We have to solve a riddle to figure out his name. Not gonna beat around the bush here, it's Lollipop. And once you enter it, he finally reveals himself. And hey, he seems to be a chill dude. You know, he's made these games for us, and he's really glad we enjoyed them. just like the old times. He does reassure us that these games aren't his last though. That's kind of an odd thing to say. Then he says there's a piece of his next project in a box. Oh, hey, a teaser for an original game by Emil Mako. Okay, that's cool. So I suppose Lollipop is supposed to be some kind of vicarious being meant to represent Emil in some way. There's probably more to it than I'm seeing here. Oh, and as far as I'm aware, I mean, this teaser is 3 years old now. I'm pretty sure the project was canned or is at least on hiatus. And we're still not done. I've definitely covered the majority of everything here, but with the Lollipop ending complete, there's still one more ending to look at, along with an extra challenge mode. Real quick, the challenges put you up against Shadow Monster Rat, or that's who I assume he is anyway. He's far more aggressive than regular Monster Rats, but holy shit is he way more fun to fight. If the difficulty was pushed down a tad, I would have loved for the main knights to have gotten this crazy. It's fight after fight with this guy, it's great. No pissing about with searching the room. This guy was way too difficult for my dumbass to beat though, so I used the Night Skip exploit just to see what I'd get out of it, and nothing. I guess you have to activate the challenge modes to receive any kind of visual completion indication, which I did check all 3 of just to see if I'd get anything. But one of the conditions require you to play and rewind the tapes, as if you don't, you die. So I wasn't able to see what you get for beating them, and I wasn't going to sit and wait 15 minutes each for the other 2 modes just for the sake of it, so I don't know, you probably get something for it, I ain't checking. Also, one of the challenges involve a far smaller flashlight, and yep. Aside from that, there is one more ending if you really want to go for 100% completion, the Forgotten ending. It's a real simple playthrough. It essentially play through the first 4 nights, but you'll have to knock over the Origami Cat each night by clicking on him, and on the 5th night, instead of starting the night like usual, you'll come face to face with him. It's really ominous. He talks about how he was the last memory of your mother, how you both created him when you were younger, but you wanted to get rid of him so badly for really no reason. He mentions how unwanted memories turn into nightmares. They'll keep coming back. They'll stop you remembering the truth of what happened. Yeah, not the most upbeat ending, but I really don't think this ending serves more than just to reinforce the idea behind how the nightmares of the Rat, Cat, and Vinny were formed. They were unwanted memories that Mary wanted to forget, only for them to haunt her in her dreams. I still have no idea why such a somber ending was chosen to sort of explain this. It's very strange. You're left on a screen with the blinking eyes of who I assume to be the nightmare of Origami Cat, implying that whenever you close your eyes, all you'll see is his staring right back at you. And no, this ending doesn't take you back to the title screen. If you want to go back, you gotta exit and boot up again. Oh yeah, and this fan game has like 12 original tracks, dude, what the hell? You'll have had most of them as the background music I've been using in this very review, but how often do you get something like that, man? Candies 1 and 2 both had like 2 pieces of original music each. This is a full-on soundtrack for a free fan game, how cool is that? And of course, each track sounds great. It's a pretty widely ranged soundtrack too. It's all tied together with an overarching somber feel. But there's a lot of variety in there. Chiptune, classical, you got this real atmospheric stuff in there too, it's all great. Also, a really interesting detail with the 8-bit music here is that it never seems to stray outside of what the NES's sound chip was capable of producing. So that's a really cool touch of realism there. Sorry, I'm a massive nerd. While we're on the topic of this though, I want to praise just the general sound design across the board here. I specifically called out the Monster Rat encounters earlier for this, but yeah, again, it's all really decent. The minigames have some real punchy sound and dialogue noises. I did find that with the Origami Cat it got a big rating because he talks a lot, especially on the first night. Minor complaint though, Emil definitely seems to know how to take good advantage of the limitations of chiptune to produce some fitting audio for these things. Anyway, goddamn, I feel like I finally covered most, if not all, of what this game has to offer. And yeah, no kidding, this is bigger than Candies 1 and 2 combined. This is a huge fan game, dude, super ambitious for what it is. As a result, there's a lot to feel opinionated on, and while I clearly don't think this is like the best fan game out there, I can at least say that this is definitely one of the most interesting and diverse fan games I've ever played. This kind of effort is usually pretty unheard of, especially for a Clickteam fan game. I know about all the Unreal Engine games, which I will be taking a look at a few eventually, but that's a whole different animal, man. Shoving as much as what Emil was able to into the limitations of this program is seriously impressive. And hey, it's flawed, right? I know some people will argue otherwise, but I think this game offered a lot of new ideas that weren't fleshed out to their fullest extent to really push this game to its limits. But you know, even if I think the gameplay suffers here, I don't know, take for instance that Candies 3 takes very obvious inspiration from Freddy's 4. You're in a bedroom, you're dreaming, your only weapon is a flashlight, you're fighting exaggerated versions of kid-friendly characters.
What I think is cool, despite what I've said about the night segments, is that Emil's managed to take similar concepts on paper and twist them into something far more unique for a fan game, and I really have to commend him for that. I mean, it sets an example that you can absolutely borrow ideas from elsewhere to create some funky cool mechanics for your own project, and still be able to mold them into something new and fun without those new ideas being carbon copies. It's that kind of attitude that I feel like more fan game developers shouldn't be afraid to take on, and developers in general. So would I recommend this? Yeah, sure. Feel free to give it a playthrough if you enjoyed Candies 1 and 2. I definitely wouldn't recommend going for 100% completion in only 2 sittings like I did, but even for more casual players, I feel like more could have been done to differentiate the gameplay if you were going for all the different endings. But yeah, with that being said, if this was the swan song of the Candies games, I wouldn't mind, but with the 4th entry potentially releasing sometime soon, we might be finding ourselves with a far more satisfying game to cap off the series. We'll just have to wait and see.